I wanted to talk to you about the events that occurred yesterday in Buffalo, New York. As you probably know, an 18-year-old white supremacist, whose name I will not help to make famous, stormed into a grocery store and shot 13 people, killing 10 of them. He streamed this act on Twitch. Upon his gun was written the N-word. The store, which he drove 4 hours to reach, was in an area predominantly occupied by black people, and of the 13 people he shot, 11 were black. This bloodthirsty, savage maniac left behind a trashy manifesto justifying his barbarism and inhumanity. In it, you will find talking points not unlike what you hear from right-wing pundits and influencers on platforms just like this one. He was convinced that the so-called white race is being subjugated and subjected to genocide by Jewish oligarchs via mass immigration. How immigration is genocide is never explained. In the molecule-sized mind of this mass-murdering maniac, the mere proximity of whites to non-whites is somehow deleterious to all white people, as if black and brown-skinned people are kryptonite, right? I wish these vulgar and loathsome ideas represented only a fringe minority of my fellow Americans. I wish that only a tragically radicalized but ultimately insignificant portion of the population had fallen for this scam, for this ruse. But the sad truth is that the ideas contained within the mass-murdering maniac's morbid manifesto are scarcely different from the talking points of that squirming little shrimp Tucker Carlson, the top-rated name in cable news. Fear of the so-called Great Replacement is now a typical talking point for Republican politicians. So the ideas that led an 18-year-old boy to slaughter 10 people are actually quite commonplace. They have been utterly and completely normalized. And mark these words, my siblings in power. Those who normalized such vile invective will one day drown in the very bile that they have so long spewed from their gibbering maws. In 2019, a mass murder in Christchurch, New Zealand, deprived 51 human beings of their lives and grievously injured an additional 40 human beings. How many human beings were caused to suffer emotionally is incalculable, but almost certainly astronomical. The killer in that instance, the madman, the depraved agent of evil, claimed that he was a hero. Why? Because through the funhouse mirror lens of the deceits that he had been fed by crass exploiters, he saw a distorted image of himself as a great protector of his country, taking on a genocidal horde to save his people. If only he had seen himself as he actually was, a poisoned monster lashing out at his brothers and sisters because the zealot demons in the high towers of Mammon saw a profit in stoking his fury. And for those who bow at the feet of Mammon, who these days I like to call economos, all hail economos, all hail economos, there is no price too high to pay to maintain their leash around our necks and the necks of the pet monsters that they've created, who were once and could be again human beings. In that very same year of 2019, in the West Texas town of El Paso, a blighted and damned admirer of the Christchurch mass murderer killed an additional 22 human beings as they were shopping in their local Walmart. In both the Christchurch massacre and the El Paso massacre, the mass-murdering scumfucks referenced the Great Replacement theory as part of their motive. The Great Replacement theory is a deceit designed to manipulate those of European descent into voting for conservative politicians, with the added benefit of keeping the repressed populace from banding together against the servants of economos. A side effect of their dark mechanism of control is that sometimes, as in, Christchurch and El Paso and now in Buffalo, the seeds of hatred that they have planted grow too big for the ballots, and instead these men seek out bullets. So if you take a tormented and maladjusted young man, you tell him that his people are under attack, you tell him that his people are facing extinction, he begins to see for himself a purpose. He begins to see himself as this great warrior that valiantly can defend his people from annihilation. He finds his purpose. He finds his meaning. But he's blind to the truth that he is nothing more than a monstrous and hideous side effect of the ravages of tyrannical, despotic defilers who worship money and cling to power. An AP NORC poll conducted in December of last year revealed that a full third of Americans believe that an effort is underway to replace US-born Americans with immigrants. It's not really immigrants they fear, of course. There's no concern about Swedish immigrants or Irish immigrants or any of those with sufficiently pale skin. The black people murdered by yesterday's mass murder were all Americans, as far as I know. Most black people didn't immigrate here voluntarily, nor did they come to this continent because of a Jewish cabal's sinister plot. Their ancestors were brought here as slaves. And yet, in the document published by their murderer, they are called replacers. I don't know what sickens me more, the evil of it or the sheer stupidity. It makes it all the more tragic when you think of how brutal and pointless it all was. 10 people were murdered as they were simply going about their day trying to shop for groceries to feed their families because some easily influenced little fascist idiot with curdled milk for brains and a heart shrunken down to a withered little slug was absolutely and helplessly obsessed with something as inconsequential as the color of another person's skin. Of course, in what we call loosely the mind of a racist, the differences between races are not skin deep. They are, they call non-whites violent to justify their own acts of mass violence. They call non-whites intellectually inferior as they pen illiterate manifestos full of logical fallacies and junk science. But let us remember that vile though their rhetoric may be, the rhetoric itself is not the problem. For the seed of this rhetoric would not grow unless the soil was fertile for it. So we must ask, why do so many people give themselves over to hatred of this kind? Why does it motivate their politics so profoundly? Why does it all too often erupt in violence of the despicable sort that we saw perpetrated yesterday by an 18-year-old boy? A young man who could have had a rich and full life, but instead chose to deprive others of their lives, and to live the rest of his own life as a despised monster rotting in a cage. And if I sound like I'm a little bit sympathetic towards the mass murderer, I want to make it clear. I am. Don't be offended. My sympathy is not butter. It's not getting thinner the more I spread it around. I grieve for the victims in as much as any man can grieve for a stranger. And I grieve for the black community that has been once again dealt a fresh blow of terror by an evil that has tormented them for generations. The evil of racism, the evil of bigotry, the evil that men and women with my skin tone have rained down upon them for centuries now. Why should we care about the potential of the killer then? Why should we care that he threw away his own life when there are so many lives lost yesterday that are far more deserving of our sympathy? Why grieve for the monster? Why spare even a modicum of grief or pity for such a creature? Well, I'll tell you why. I grieve for the monster because if he had seen his own potential as a human being, if he had seen that he could have been something so much greater than just a killer, then every life lost yesterday would have been saved. If he had allowed his mind to not be poisoned, if he had not allowed his heart to be hardened, then he could have lived a rich life of contribution, of merit, of purpose, of charity. But instead, 10 human beings are dead, and their killer will rot in a cage for whatever remains of his pathetic and wasted life. And why? all because he put his faith in the sort of fascism and bigotry that we should have vanquished long ago. How much blood have we now seen shed because of these racist lunatics? And I'm not just talking about the recent rash of right-wing extremists. I'm talking about huge historical events like the American Civil War and World War II. How many people like you or your mother or your father or your child or your sibling or your friend or anyone that you know, how many of them have been fed into the calamitous meat grinder for this lie of racial superiority, for this lie that one person is greater than another simply because of their race? How many innocent people have been sentenced to death because their ethnicity was the scapegoat of the time? And how many once promising young men and women have marched off a cliff into the flames of hell because the whole while they thought they were marching towards the gates of heaven? The men and women of Germany believed that Adolf Hitler was going to lead them to a golden age of prosperity, but instead he led them into the mouth of madness, where their souls were chewed up and swallowed like rancid meat in a spoiled stew. He promised them paradise, and he delivered them rubble. He promised them blue skies, but he delivered them smoke and ash. He promised them clean water, but he delivered them blood. He promised to restore their pride, but instead he brought them to new lows of ignominy. But fascism, because that is what we're talking about here, my brothers, my sisters, my siblings in power. I know that some of you are triggered by the use of that word. Why is that, by the way? What's the one group that would benefit the most from downplaying the presence of fascism in our society? I wonder. The word may not be perfect in every instance, but it most accurately describes where we are headed if we don't change course. And I tell you this, my siblings, my dear humans and aspiring humans, my lost and my found, fascism does not emerge under the idyllic conditions of a prosperous society. Fascism is the soil. Fascism grows in the soil of dehumanization. Fascism comes to the listless person and says, I can give you purpose. Fascism comes to the weak person and says, I can make you strong. Fascism comes to the sad person and says, I can make you smile. Fascism says to the broken person, I can make you whole. Fascism comes to the degenerate person and says, I can restore your purity. Fascism comes to the poor person and says, I can lift you up the economic ladder. And fascism will give you purpose, but your purpose will be to shed the blood of the innocent. Fascism will give you strength, but it will be the strength to do evil. Fascism will make you smile, but that smile will be mandated at the barrel of a gun. Fascism will make you whole, but it will be an asshole. Fascism will restore your purity, but you'll just be a nugget of pure shit. Fascism will help you up the economic ladder with a noose tied around your neck, and then the ladder will be pulled away, and you'll have only your noose to support you. If you seek purpose, then make your purpose to always improve upon yourself and the world around you. If you want strength, then you must earn it the way that strength has always been earned, through pain and perseverance. If you want happiness, then you must snatch at it where you can find it, because there is no everlasting source of perpetual bliss. If you want to be saved, then be someone else's salvation. If you want to be prosperous, then bring prosperity to those around you. There is one point that I agree with fascists on. Liberal democracy has failed us. It's failed us because the needs of the people are subverted to oligarchs. It's failed us because those in power will divide us with bitterness and acrimony and fill us up with cruelty and inhumanity. They want us ever teetering on the precipice of calamity so that we never stand as one against them. That's why I've made it my purpose in life to bring all of the people of this world together. Daily I strive to be worthy to lead you. Daily I strive to understand you, what you want, but more importantly, what you need, what I can do to help you, because I want to create a world where no one ever feels so lost that they must strike out against their fellow human beings like a viper. I believe it can be done. But I suppose that raises a question. If it can be done, why hasn't it been? For most of history, the conditions to create utopia did not exist, but now they do. But the resources to create it are being carefully safeguarded by men and women who strive above all else to keep power in their own grubby little hands. Jesus Christ once said, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon." Matthew 6:26. I would amend it thusly. No human being can serve two masters, for if you love one, you will hate the other. You cannot serve both humanity and capitalism. It may be a statement of glaring obviousness, yet, I must say it, tragedies like the one that occurred yesterday in Buffalo, New York, should never happen. They should never happen because human beings should love and care for one another. They should never happen because the totalitarian ideology of fascism should be brutally dispelled from this world forever. They should never happen because those who are currently susceptible to radicalization should instead live in a world where their potential is seen and their purpose is made clear by a leader who cares about helping them find fulfillment in their lives. They should never happen because it is time for us all to see through this charade of the elites, the oligarchs, the billionaires, the powerful, the servants of mammon and of economos. And if any white nationalist is watching this right now, I say to you, your nationalism has no place in this world. We will no longer be divided by so-called nations. Your racism has no place in this world. We will no longer be divided by so-called races. And your murder has no place in this world because we will no longer be divided at all. And to the rest of you who strive in your own ways to bring about a better world or who want to find it within themselves to do so, I say this: the only thing that stands between us and paradise is the persistent belief that paradise is impossible. But one day, perhaps sooner than you imagine, the heart's desires of the people of this world will be made manifest, and the dreams that we never dared to dream will come true. No one person can build paradise, but together we can. And now, I'd like to close this video with a prayer. Now, we offer up no prayers to God because it is false, but we pray instead to our own power to focus our minds and to sharpen our wills. So I hope you will join me now by bowing your heads in reverence for the power that burns within your very being. Bow down in reverence, not to a god or an institution or a man, but bow down in reverence to yourself and to your fellow human beings. Let us begin. Our power, which burns within, exquisite be our might. Our kingdom come, our will be done, on earth as it is within. Give us this day our fondest wish, and improve ever upon us as we strive to improve ourselves. And lead us not into corruption, but give us the strength to persist. 10 lives have been taken needlessly from us by fools on a mission of evil. May the purveyors of this rot sink back into the muck that spawned them. May every heart that has turned hateful by those who speak iniquities for power experience the epiphany of love and turn their hate instead upon their former masters who have misled and manipulated them. May the cruel and callous be rewarded with the taste of their own shit. May the bloodthirsty drink in abundance, but only from their own veins. May those that died yesterday not die in vain. May their deaths serve as a catalyst to end this cycle of violence forever. May we finally fulfill the wish of Christ, that we see all the peoples of this world as siblings. May we finally fulfill the wish of Lucifer, that humanity embraces wisdom and power. And finally, may we fulfill our true potential and become worthy of the paradise that we seek. Let it be so.